You're pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer walks back to his car and radios for a K9 unit. 10 minutes later, a dog arrives. It walks around your vehicle. It sits down near your trunk. The officer says, "The dog alerted. We're searching your car." Your hands start shaking. You ask, "Can you do that? Don't you need a warrant?" The officer smiles. "We don't need a warrant. The dog gave us probable cause." But here's the question most people never ask. Was that stop even legal in the first place? I'm Attorney Atlas, and today I'm breaking down exactly what police can and cannot do when they call a K9 unit during a traffic stop, including a Supreme Court ruling that most officers don't want you to know about. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about what a K9 unit is and how it's used. A K9 unit is a trained police dog, usually a German Shepherd or Belgian Malinois, that's been trained to detect specific scents. Most commonly, these dogs are trained to alert to drugs like marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin. When a dog alerts, it means the dog has detected one of those scents. The dog might sit, bark, scratch, or perform another behavior it's been trained to do. And here's the key legal point. A K9 alert is considered probable cause. That means if the dog alerts on your vehicle, the officer now has legal justification to search your car without a warrant and without your consent. But here's what most people don't know. Just because a dog is called doesn't mean the search is automatically legal. There are strict constitutional limits on how long police can detain you, when they can call a dog, and what they can do while they're waiting for the K9 to arrive. Let's break it down. Imagine you're pulled over for a traffic violation. Maybe you were speeding. Maybe your registration is expired. Maybe you didn't use a turn signal. The officer walks up, asks for your license and registration, and goes back to his car to write you a ticket. But instead of just writing the ticket, he radios for a K9 unit. Now you're sitting there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Finally, the dog arrives. It sniffs around your car. It alerts. The officer searches your vehicle. Here's the question. Was that legal? The answer comes from a landmark Supreme Court case called Rodriguez versus United States, decided in 2015. Here's what the court said. Police cannot extend a traffic stop beyond the time reasonably necessary to complete the mission of the stop, which is to address the traffic violation and related safety checks. In other words, once the officer has done everything related to the traffic stop, checked your license, run your plates, written the ticket, the stop is over. The officer cannot make you wait longer just so a drug dog can arrive. If the K9 isn't already on the scene, and the officer makes you wait for it to show up, that delay violates your Fourth Amendment rights, unless the officer has independent reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Let me say that again. The officer cannot extend your traffic stop to wait for a K9 unit unless they have reasonable suspicion that you're involved in something beyond a traffic violation. So what does that mean in practice? Let's say you're pulled over for speeding. The officer checks your license. Everything's valid. He writes you a ticket. The whole process should take about 5 to 10 minutes. But instead of handing you the ticket and letting you go, he says, "I've got a K9 unit on the way. Just sit tight." 15 minutes later, the dog arrives. That delay? Unconstitutional. According to Rodriguez, the officer had no legal basis to detain you beyond the time needed to issue the speeding ticket. The K9 sniff, and any search that followed, is fruit of an illegal detention. Your attorney can file a motion to suppress any evidence found during that search. But here's the exception. If the officer develops reasonable suspicion of criminal activity during the stop, they can extend the detention. Examples of reasonable suspicion. You're visibly nervous and shaking. The officer smells marijuana. You give conflicting answers about where you're going. There are visible drug paraphernalia in plain view. You have a passenger who's acting suspiciously or who has an outstanding warrant. If any of these things happen, the officer now has independent justification to detain you longer and to call a K9 unit. But nervousness alone is not enough. The officer needs specific, articulable facts. Now let's talk about what happens if the K9 is already on the scene. If the officer who pulled you over is a K9 handler and the dog is already in the car, the rules change. The officer can walk the dog around your vehicle during the traffic stop without extending the detention. That's allowed. The dog sniff itself is not considered a search under the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court ruled in Illinois versus Cabal that a dog sniff during a lawful traffic stop does not violate your privacy rights. as long as it doesn't prolong the stop. So if the dog is already there, and the sniff happens while the officer is writing your ticket, that's legal. But if the officer finishes writing your ticket, hands it to you, and then says, "Hold on, let me walk my dog around your car real quick," that's a problem. At that point, the stop is over. You're free to go. The officer can't detain you further without reasonable suspicion. So what should you say if a K9 unit is called? Here's your script. Stay calm and polite. Do not panic. Do not argue. Do not physically resist. Ask, am I free to go, or am I being detained? This is the most important question. If the officer says you're free to go, you can leave. If they say you're being detained, ask why. If they say you're being detained for a K9 unit, ask, what is the reasonable suspicion for extending this stop? You don't have to say it exactly like that. You can say, "Officer, I'd like to know why I'm being detained beyond the traffic stop." The officer may not answer. That's okay. You've created a record. If this goes to court, your attorney will use that question to challenge the detention. Do not consent to a search. The officer may say, "Do you mind if I search your car?" Your answer should always be, "I do not consent to any searches." Say it clearly. Say it politely. Say it every time. Even if the dog alerts, you should still say you do not consent. This preserves your rights in court. Do not admit to anything. The officer may ask, "Is there anything in the car I should know about? Have you been smoking marijuana? Do you have any drugs or weapons?" Do not answer. Politely say, "I'm invoking my right to remain silent. I'd like to speak with an attorney." If the dog alerts and the officer searches anyway, do not interfere. Even if you believe the search is illegal, do not physically resist. Let it happen. Document everything you can remember, the time, what the officer said, how long you were detained. Then contact an attorney immediately. Now let's talk about K9 accuracy, because this is a huge issue. K9 units are not perfect. Studies have shown that drug dogs can have false alert rates as high as 50% in some cases. Why? Handler bias. Dogs are trained to read their handler's cues. If the handler believes there are drugs in the car, the dog may alert even if there's nothing there. Residual odor. The dog may alert to the smell of drugs that were in the car days or weeks ago, but are no longer present. Environmental factors, heat, wind, distractions, and stress can all affect a dog's accuracy. But here's the problem. Courts generally defer to the dog's training and certification. If the dog is certified and the handler says it alerted, that's usually enough for probable cause, even if the search turns up nothing. This is why it's so important to challenge the legality of the stop itself. If the stop was unlawfully extended, it doesn't matter if the dog alerted. The whole search gets thrown out. Let's talk about some real-world scenarios. Scenario 1. You're pulled over for a traffic violation. The officer takes your license and goes back to his car. 20 minutes later, a K9 unit arrives. The dog sniffs your car and alerts. The officer searches and finds nothing. Is this legal? Probably not. Unless the officer had reasonable suspicion during those 20 minutes, the extended detention violated Rodriguez. Any evidence found would likely be suppressed. Scenario 2. You're pulled over for speeding. The officer smells marijuana. He calls for a K9 unit. You wait 15 minutes. The dog alerts. The officer finds marijuana in your trunk. Is this legal? Possibly. The smell of marijuana can provide reasonable suspicion to extend the stop. The officer had independent justification to call the K9. This would likely hold up in court, though it depends on your state's laws regarding marijuana. Scenario 3. You're pulled over. The officer is a K9 handler. While writing your ticket, he walks his dog around your car. The dog alerts. He searches and finds drugs. Is this legal? Yes. The dog was already on scene. The sniff didn't extend the stop. The alert provided probable cause. This is a lawful search. Scenario 4. The officer finishes writing your ticket, hands it to you, and says, "You're free to go." Then he says, "Actually, wait, let me walk my dog around your car." Is this legal? No. The stop was over. You are free to go. The officer cannot redetain you without reasonable suspicion. You can politely say, "I'd like to leave now," and drive away. Let's recap. What police can do. Call a K9 unit if they have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity beyond the traffic violation. Walk a K9 around your car if the dog is already on scene and it doesn't extend the stop. Search your car if the dog alerts. The alert is considered probable cause. What police cannot do: extend your traffic stop just to wait for a K-9 unit to arrive. This violates Rodriguez versus United States. Detain you longer than reasonably necessary to complete the mission of the stop. Search your car without probable cause, a warrant, or your consent. What you should do: ask, am I free to go, or am I being detained? Ask, what is the reasonable suspicion for extending this stop? Say, I do not consent to any searches. Invoke your right to remain silent. Do not physically resist. Document everything and contact an attorney immediately. Here's the bottom line. K-9 units are a powerful law enforcement tool, but they are not a blank check to violate your rights. You have constitutional protections. The Supreme Court has ruled that police cannot extend a traffic stop just to wait for a drug dog. If they do, any evidence found during that search can be challenged in court. But you have to know your rights. You have to assert them, and you have to stay calm and professional while you do it. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe for more legal breakdowns. Drop a comment if you have questions. And remember, this is educational content, not legal advice. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary by jurisdiction. Consult a licensed attorney for advice specific to your situation. I'm Attorney Atlas. Stay informed. Stay protected.